Today we are sewing like a choose your own adventure kind of sew, if that makes any sense at all, which it probably doesn't. So let me explain. I've heard from a lot of you that your Dollar Trees are sad and that you can only find the plain dish drying mats there. So I'm going to address that today and give you two ideas of how to make something beautiful using just the regular plain old dish drying mat. And you know how we make it beautiful? We cover it up with other things. This one is a great scrap buster. It's a great intro into like semi-quilting, but really not like stressful, oh my gosh, we're making a quilt, because we're not. The first item that I'm going to make is a patchwork placemat. Once that's made, we can either leave it as a placemat or I'm going to show you how to turn it into a pouch from there. So wherever you are in your quilting / sewing journey, this project is for you. These dish mats are 12 by 15 inches, which is actually like the perfect size for a little placemat. Next thing you're going to want to do is gather some scraps. I always have scraps on hand left over from projects, and this is a great way to get rid of them. The color focus for me for this project was anything but light colors. So I didn't want to use any like whites or beiges or anything that was on the light spectrum. I really wanted everything to be a rich, like deep color. You want to cut 54 squares that are 2.5 inches by 2.5 inches. This is a great grid for cutting little squares because it's got all these different like 1/2 inch marks and everything on it. This is what I always grab when I'm cutting little quilt squares. And the fun of patchwork is that it doesn't have to be organized or perfect. If you're looking for a palette cleansing project, something to just get your mind off of the hard things that you've been working on, this is perfect. It gives you a chance to like flex your creative muscles without a whole lot of effort. What you're going to want to do is lay these out in a grid pattern going 9 across and 6 down. So go ahead and cut your squares out till you have 54 total. And then I want you to lay them out. Try not to put any that are alike next to each other and get your grid sorted out the way that you want it. And then I will show you how to sew them together. So you should have 6 going up and down, and then it'll go 9 across. I've only got 2 rows here because I don't want to confuse you. The first row that you're going to sew will be your far left row to the second from the left row. And the way that I like to set this up is I will just go right across the line and flip those on each other, pretty sides touching. And we're going to chain piece these. Before you freak out and think that's way too hard, let me show you what it is first, and then you can decide if it's too hard or scary for you. I'm going to put my 1/4 inch quilting foot on. The reason I like this foot is it's got this little bar right here that I can push my fabric up against, and when my needle is centered, it gives me a perfect 1/4 inch seam, which is great for quilting. I'm using regular white polyester thread, nothing crazy or fancy. So whatever you've got in your sewing room, that's what you should use. I'm going to center my stitch, and I'm going to take my very top 2 pieces, make sure that the edges are lined up. I'm going to sew straight down the line. Now, as you can see, I'm like right at the edge here. I've just finished stitching this row. What I'm going to do is prepare my next row, and this is where the chain part of chain piecing comes in. I'm going to lay this in, maybe lift your presser foot just a little bit to get it under there. And just keep sewing, and your feed dogs will continue to pull that fabric through without breaking your stitches. Take your 2 pieces, lift that presser foot just a teeny bit, and push it through. When I say push, I mean don't push, because your feed dogs do all the work. See how I didn't even touch the fabric? I think a misconception when you're learning to sew is people think you have to like push that fabric through. And you really don't. Your feed dogs are these little sled-looking things down underneath your needle. And that is their whole purpose, is to pull your fabric through at an even rate. When you reach the end of your row, cut your thread and pull it out. Open all of those pieces back up. Now, I will tell you, one thing I think is helpful is once you get your grid pattern laid out, before you start sewing, take a picture of it. If you just take a quick snapshot, then you can refer back to that to make sure that you are matching your colors exactly the way that you had planned. Okay, so I've got this all open, and I'm going to take my next row and start putting those pieces on and sewing them through. Continue doing that and then flip your rows down on each other, and then you'll end up with something like this. Press all of those seams out on the back so it's nice and flat, and then we are ready to move forward with our project. Go back to your scrap pile and find a piece of fabric that's about the size, a little bit bigger maybe, than your dish mat. That's going to become the back of your project. Now listen, if this whole patchwork piecing part completely stresses you out, just make the front like the back where you're just using a solid piece. That's totally fine. There is nothing wrong with that. It's still giving you good practice. You're still going to come out with something really cute. I'm just saying, if you have scraps to use up, this is a great option. Let me show you how to cut the backing fabric, and then we'll do a little quilting. And when I say quilting, I mean that very loosely. We're talking about just some fun, like maybe wavy lines, we'll see. I don't know. I have a pretty good sized scrap of this laying around, so I'm going to use this, and that's what it's going to be. So this will become the back of your placemat, or if you're going to continue on with this adventure, it will be the inside of your bag. And I'm not even using my ruler. I am just cutting around the edge here. We've got our backing piece now. I'm going to lay that pretty side down. We've got our dish drying mat. Lay that right on top. And then I've got my cute little patchwork piece, or if you are new to sewing and that stresses you out, you just have another piece of fabric. And that's fine as well. If you do the 9x6 squares, it should fit on top of your dish drying mat just about perfectly. For my next trick, I'm going to take some safety pins and baste my pieces together. And by baste, I mean I'm just attaching them through all the layers of the fabric using a safety pin. You could use basting spray if you want to avoid clips or pins. I find that safety pins work pretty well for me, so that's what I'm going to do. But again, it's your world and I'm just living in it. So you do whatever makes you feel happy. Sew with your feelings today. We're all basted together. See how they're attached with those safety pins? It's not going anywhere. It's time to sew some quilting lines on here. Let me show you on the machine how I set up for this. There are several different types of feet that you can put on your sewing machine to achieve quilting greatness. The first would be a walking foot. The purpose of a walking foot is it has those feed dogs that I was telling you about earlier on the top side, which gives you sort of like four-wheel drive for your sewing machine. So when you're sewing through thick fabrics like these, this would be a great tool. You can do some really fun, just basic stitches using the walking foot. I am actually going to try and quilt this just using my zigzag foot, my regular sewing machine foot that is meant for just basic stitching on my machine. So for me, that's I think it's an O, J. It's a J foot on my brother machine. And we're going to see if it works. Now you can also use whatever thread you want. There's lots of different types of quilting thread. If you're brand new and you just want to use the regular polyester thread you've been sewing with for the project, that's also fine. I'm going to switch to my Floriani embroidery thread. This is kind of like a silkier thread, and I just think it looks really pretty when you're quilting. So I'm going to do that in my machine. But again, sew with your feelings. So if that doesn't feel good to you and you want to use a different type of thread or just the same type that you've been using this whole time, I'm fairly certain the world will keep turning. Here's my school of thought on this whole sew with your feelings thing. I think new sewists get so worried about breaking the rules when they're learning that it paralyzes them. And I want to show you that yes, it's important to know the fundamentals of sewing and to know what the rules are, but it is also okay to just experiment. So if you are limited financially, or if you don't have a huge craft store nearby and polyester thread is the only thing you have access to create this project, I want you to use it. There is nobody that's going to come and tell you, oh, well, you didn't use Floriani embroidery thread. That's the worst. That's not a thing. And if they do, they're obnoxious and they shouldn't be judging you. That's not nice. I'll get off my soapbox now. So we're going to try and do this using just this window. Okay, so we're going to try and do this using just the zigzag foot. I'm going to do maybe a basic wavy stitch on this. You could also just do straight lines like on here if you want to just sew right across, like a quarter inch above this line and a quarter inch below, all the way down, and then turn it and do a quarter inch above and a quarter inch below. That's also an easy way. You could do diagonal straight stitches. I'm just doing this because I've never tried it before and I thought it would be fun. Better me than you, right? Let's see how it goes. I think I'll do my wavy stitches starting over here. So I'm going to take this first safety pin out. This is actually like moving through perfectly fine. I'm just turning with my hand as I go. And it made like a cute little wavy stitch. See that? That's fine. Because this is so small, I don't feel worried about starting like on an edge. But if you were doing a quilt, it's usually recommended that you start in the middle. But again, there's like a million schools of thought. You do what makes you feel happy. I'm sure the quilt police will come after me like they always do. I'm a rebel. Just keep your hands nice and solidly planted, holding down that fabric as you go so that it doesn't bubble, and removing your pins. Don't try and play like chicken with those pins. Just take them out. It's not worth trying to sew over one and then breaking your needle and shrapnel flying all over which way and wherever. It's not meant to be stressful. It's meant to be fun. Are you having fun? When you're doing this wavy line technique, don't be afraid to cross over the lines too. Like if you want them to cross as you sew, that's fine. And you can make them as wide as you want. So this zigzag foot, this regular J foot, is doing the job pretty well. Another reason why you should just give it a try. And like I said, as you get more comfortable with quilting, you'll probably be interested in learning some of the more specific techniques and how to do things to make your life a little bit easier. That walking foot, it makes things easier for you. It helps pull the fabric through a little bit faster and a little bit more evenly. But for right now, this is perfectly fine. Always double check your back too and make sure that your tension's looking good. Mine's looking pretty good for this project, but sometimes when those stitches look loopy or too tight on the back side, you just need to adjust things a little bit. And I have videos for that where we talk about tensions and how to troubleshoot those. I'm going to keep working my way across this quilt, and I'll meet you back here once we have some fun wavy lines on here. So here's how this turned out. Super cute. I think it's fun. Just a little bit wavy lines, nothing stressful. There's the back, looking great. So now the next step we want to do is finish off these edges. And to do that, I'm going to use some quilt binding. To make quilt binding, you really just cut 2.5-inch regular strips, sew them together at the short ends, and then fold it in half with the ugly sides touching. It's like that easy. Let me show you how to attach it to your placemat. It's not hard. We are going to do a mitered corner, which sounds kind of scary, but it's really not. To sew your quilt binding on, you're going to take the raw edge and line it up maybe halfway across one of your rows. And I want you to clip it so that it's nice and snug right against that edge. Now, when we go to sew this, we're going to do a 1/4 inch seam, but we're not going to start right at this edge. We're going to start about 2 inches in. I've switched to my black thread for this part because we're sewing with the black binding, and I just think it'll help make those stitches disappear a little bit better. I'm using my regular zigzag foot, and I am going to place my fabric about 2 inches down and start sewing there at 1/4 inch. Start with a back stitch. I want my stitch length to be just whatever your regular stitch length is on your machine. Mine's a 2.5. And I'm sewing straight down at this 1/4 inch mark. Keep everything nice and flat. When you get to that edge, I want you to stop 1/4 inch away from the edge. Back stitch. You can do it once or twice. Cut your thread. I know that feels weird. Just go with the plan. And you're going to fold this edge up so that it lines with your edge. Hold it with your fingers and fold it back down so it creates a triangle, an overlapping triangle. And if you want to, you can clip this right here on the left edge to hold it straight. But what you want to be doing is having a point sticking out right here. and start back in at your 1/4 inch all the way at the edge, back stitch, and sew at 1/4 inch all the way to the next corner. I'm at my next corner. I'm going to sew just till I get a 1/4 inch away, back stitch, cut, pull it out and turn it, lay the fabric up and lay it back down so it creates an overlapping triangle that is even and flush with the edge of your fabric. Clip it on the left side so it gets out of the way of your presser foot. Start in at 1/4 inch at the edge, back stitch, and then keep going. I'm going to keep working my corners, and then when I get to the part where we need to finish off this binding where we started, I'll show you what to do. Guess who's back? Back again. All right, we're getting close to where we have that overlapping stuff happening. So let me show you how to navigate that. So kind of up to it, but not over the overlap. And when you get close, figure out where your overlap is. My stitches start right about here. So I'm going to cut my binding just a little bit shorter than where those stitches are. Let me show you up close. So I have folded down the edge of my beginning piece. Press it with your fingers, make sure it's nice and even, and then open it up and lay your end piece down into it so that it's nice and even. And because you cut it a little shorter than where your stitches started, it should lay nice and flat. Hold it down with your fingers, put your presser foot back down, and keep stitching till your stitches cross over. Do a back stitch to secure everything. Cut your thread and let's see what we got. Okay, well, this is cute. I love bordering things with black. I don't know why. I just think it really makes the colors pop. Look how pretty that is. That would be really fun in your kitchen or wherever you guys like to eat. The next step, I like to take my iron and press these from the front nice and flat. And when I get to those mitered corners, I'm just going to poke in there with my front of my iron where it's like a triangle shape. Flatten out as best as you can. I suppose, speaking of choose your own adventure, if you wanted to use this as a dish drying mat that's just a little fancier, you could do that as well. Who says a dish drying mat has to just be red? You could sass it up just like this. Why not? It still has the absorbency factor in the middle. Next thing I'm going to do is fold down the edges to the back and clip them. And you're going to do this all the way around your placemat. Now, when you get to that mitered corner, pull it up. See how it's got this nice little crease right here? If you fold one side down, as you keep clipping, throw a clip right there, and then fold this side down, and then the opposite side down, and they should meet right on the edge there. If it's not perfect, it's okay. See, got your corners kind of matching. Like I said, if that's not perfect, who cares? There is time to get your quilting perfected. And I say perfected loosely because none of us is perfect. You can learn more skills as you go. What I'm saying is your skill level will increase with every project that you do, every tutorial that you watch, every book you read, every program you tune into about quilting. That is a fact-finding mission that is going to do nothing but help you in your quilting journey. But for right now, seeking perfection on these projects is going to just leave you feeling frustrated. And that's not what we want. We want you to feel successful and happy and like sewing. If you seek perfection from the get-go when it comes to sewing or quilting, you're not going to find it, which is then going to make you sour to the hobby. And I think that's why a lot of people quit without even really getting started, is it's too hard for certain people to be okay with things not quite lining up perfectly. There's time for that. When you're learning, just focus on having fun and making something that makes you feel good. Let's sew this binding down. I'm going to sew this from the front side because my back side is longer. It's going to overlap. I'm not even going to try and make these like in the ditch, which is sewing in the seam line. I'm going to do it like a 1/16 of an inch away, just so that I don't stress myself out. And you just sew nice, straight stitches. And that's why we clipped this the whole way around. We were making sure that that back side surpasses the front side, so you know when you're sewing down this line that you're hitting all the fabrics. When you get to a corner, lift your presser foot, turn your work, make sure everything's nice and flat, and proceed on your merry way. This would also be cute to put like plants on top of, like if you have a table that you display plants on, how cute would this be to put under it? And then, you know, if your plant makes a little bit of a watery mess when you're feeding it or watering it, then you can just wash this. Easy peasy. Okay, approach that corner slowly. Sew up into the crease, lift your presser foot, turn your work, reestablish everything, make sure it's nice and flat, and proceed. I love sewing binding. I think some people super hate it, but I find it very therapeutic. But I will say I usually hand stitch that first part, but this part I like to hand sew because I can really hide the stitches. And the other thing, especially when it comes to quilting, is it gives me one last chance to kind of get my hands on that quilt and really enjoy it before I either give it to somebody or it gets in, you know, put into use and circulation in our house. It's just a good way to reflect on like, wow, I made this with my hands. That's pretty awesome. I'm going to keep working my way around, and then when we're done, I'll meet you back here. And then it's choose your own adventure time. Once you finish sewing your binding, you'll have a beautiful little placemat that you can use in your kitchen or under a plant. This is a budget-friendly project that adds a nice pop of color to your house while utilizing scraps from leftover projects and then a $1.25 regular dish drying mat from the Dollar Tree. So you're really not putting a whole lot of money into this. If you made a set of these for somebody, how fun would that be to give them as a housewarming present? I love patchwork stuff. I know it's not for everybody, but I love the rainbow. So anytime I can incorporate colors of the rainbow all together, I'm going to do it. Now, let's say that you want to turn this into a boxy bag. Well, you certainly can. Stay tuned for my next tutorial where I'm going to take this fun placemat and we're going to turn it into a boxy bag. It's a twofer. I'm Chelsea with She Sews Seams. I hope you had fun making this placemat, soon to be boxy bag with me. Stay tuned for the next tutorial and I'll see you next time.